In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we're going to talk to Yolanda from Bitly. Yolanda is responsible for diversity hiring. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm looking forward to my guest today. Yolanda, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for reaching out and inviting me. It's such an honor to be on your show.
It's amazing. Yolanda, can you tell us in 5 or 6 sentences, who are you?
Yes. So who am I? I am professionally Senior Director of Talent Acquisition at a company called Bitly. My journey into this space has, I think, accidentally happened over the years. I started my career right out of college in finance. I actually got a finance and business degree, and I was working for, I think, Goldman Sachs. And I was a trading person. I was trading on 75 different exchanges. And one day they were saying, we're doing a career event at a university. I would love for people on the job to talk to students around how to become a financial analyst. And so then I attended one event and I was like, I actually enjoyed talking to people about their careers. This was fun. I love the numbers. I love the trading world, but speaking to people about like how to, set yourself up to get a job, I'm like, that was kind of cool. So I started drifting towards that. And then over time, I just completely transitioned into recruiting and then moved up from smaller companies into big tech. So I've worked for Workday, previously Facebook, that's called Meta now. And then now I do work for a smaller tech company, but that's how my journey started. And then outside of my professional world, I love to write music and sing. So just something that I love to do. That is just a core pillar of who I am. So, yeah.
It's actually incredibly interesting that both our ways into the world of HR are so very similar, given we both used to be bankers, used to work on a trading floor, and while talking to young people, how they can progress their career, how can they find fulfilling occupation, we both found that, well, this is this is our route, and that's actually absolutely interesting.
Yes, no, it's interesting because I was doing the finance world because I'm good at numbers, and I say that humbly. Some people are just good. I used to actually tutor calculus part-time going to school, but I wasn't passionate about it. I was doing it because it's just something that I know I was good at, but I learned that engaging with people is really where I light up, and so that true passion is what I gravitated towards.
I think it's also quite remarkable that, well, very many people, like the two of us, will do something different in the beginning of their career, however, then find, well, helping people find the right career, not just finding the right job, but finding the right career, finding purpose in what they're doing is very rewarding, and therefore they move from a, let's say, business perspective or from a business occupation towards the HR world.
Absolutely. And in recruiting, that's definitely something I talk about with people when, talking about finding a job, is I speak on it on both sides. With the candidates, it's really like, is this something you're passionate about, right? Because that's going to be telling us how much you're going to give into this role. And with the hiring managers too, is like, what is your elevator pitch that I can sell somebody on why they should come work for your team? And I want to hear something beyond just the minimum requirements of the job. What I want to hear is why you're a great leader, the culture that you're building, why anyone should aspire to come and work for you, right? And the vision that you're building for your team. That's what I want to say, because I think that's what gets people connected. As human beings, we obviously have our livelihoods, we have to pay bills, right? Families to feed. So we obviously need a job, most of us do, right? But I think underneath that, we also need a sense of like inclusion and passion and well-being, right? Especially mental well-being. So all of that combined, right, is something that I bring into my space. In the beginning was more very operational, and now I've kind of taken a step further where I'm like looking at it being more psychological.
Um, how did you find working for a very large organization like Goldman Sachs, and then you transition towards the tech industry and, well, different size of companies? How did you experience that?
Culture-wise, it was very, very different. So as you may know, historically working in banking or even in financial services, the saving something as a dress code is very, very formal. I had to, dress very formal every day. There's some days I actually literally wore a tie and a shirt too, right? That was like, and I'll be so excited when they let us wear jeans on Fridays. And I cannot wait for that. Now, the transition into the tech space, you can tell the culture is a little more relaxed. I remember my very first interview when I was interviewing at Facebook to get a job. And I came in for that interview super, super formally dressed. I wore a suit, I wore dress pants, and then I walked into the building and everyone's wearing, hoodies and t-shirts and jeans. And I felt like I'm too serious for this environment. I remember even when I was walked into the conference room where the interview was going to be, someone like roller skate past me with his roller skates. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is completely unprofessional. What environment is this, right? People are roller skating in the building. And, I saw people wearing different hair colors. And I just was like, oh my goodness. But then that was my cultural awakening, that it's not about how you present, it's about the quality of your work that you actually do. Whereas, in financial services, a little bit of both, right? You have to present a certain way and you have to do the great job as well.
Perhaps they were worried that you were a representative of the SEC or some kind of a regulatory body.
I felt like, am I an IRS agent that I'm here to audit? I felt like, oh, am I an FBI investigator? I looked so serious, for the environment. I remember in my second interview, I took my jacket off just to look a little less relaxed, even though I was still wearing a shirt.
It's actually a hilarious story, but it's actually, I think, a very interesting career path given, well, also from, it's probably the same for you. So very many people I worked with in my graduate class or in my first years in banking, many of those people have moved into the world of technology or founded or started their own company. So it's actually a pretty interesting career path indeed.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think the tech space has evolved because I even have a sibling who was a pharmacist for, I think, 15 years and recently completely changed and went to the tech space, like drastic change. But I think that the tech space is evolving over time, right? 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago was a very different, right, brand. But today we're seeing that we're making impact as far as like in technology is making impact just as far as how we operate as a society. And being the cornerstone of that, being part of that, really you feel more meaningful. I love, don't get me wrong, the finance world, I felt like I'm working to help millionaires become more millionaires and billionaires become more billionaires, right? I'm trying to make sure to keep the rich very rich, right? I'm working on their hedge funds. I'm making sure that they keep making all this money. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in the tech space, I started feeling like there's a little more meaning to my job, like say working at Facebook or Meta. They're trying to connect the world, right? That sounds really interesting to me, right? Looking even today at Bitly too, right? There's a lot of things that Bitly is doing to connect the world as well. I'm like, oh, that's more meaningful to me. And it just brings more passion with that. Again, I'm not discounting the financial industry. So anyone listening to this, if you're in finance, you're awesome. I'm just talking about like the meaningful transition mentally for me.
And perhaps one last question on that. So, what are the qualities, what are the skills that you acquired at Goldman that are still very useful for you nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. The analytics piece of my work, right? I was trading on 75 different exchanges globally. And so I had to know all the time where each exchange would close, and we're trading mostly futures and options. And so there's a lot of data as far as like just knowing the math and converting certain things like what's the power, or just knowing the math in how you settle those trades to make sure that every single cent is accurate.
Mhm.
And while that's very heavy, I bring that to my role today in like the HR or people space, right? Because you have to also use numbers to understand and track success. For especially in recruiting, KPIs, right? Time to fill, time to hire, offer acceptance rate, all those things are just really understanding the direction that we're going. On the global people side, it's really like, say, return attrition rate and the metrics around just the health of the company. So that to me has been very impactful. Just like numbers come naturally to me and it helps me. But I'm also very careful though that I don't make numbers the end all be all of everything. Because when you're dealing with people, you have to think about qualitative data and quantitative data, right? Quantitative data, obviously, is the analytics and the reports. The qualitative data is things you can't measure, but that are making changes, like the impacting the culture, right? Maybe you run an initiative that creates a much more inclusive environment. Hard to track that on the spreadsheet, but you can get a sentiment change by maybe you're seeing more people stay, you're seeing more people getting promoted, right? So it's a mixed bag on that.
Can you tell us a bit more about exactly your approach towards numbers-driven recruiting, or perhaps it's numbers as a major impact, uh, is one of the major input factors, so to say. Perhaps number-driven sounds a bit like too quantitative, perhaps. Can you tell us a bit more about this, given, well, I think many organizations struggle to, first of all, obtain data, then to make sure you obtain the right data, and then also to make sure that not only you obtain and get the right data, but also to work with data. How have you approached this so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's taking a step back and then asking yourself, how is success measured in the work we do, whatever that work is? So if that's been in an HRBP space or compensation or recruiting, how do we track success towards our goals, right? If we have goals that are defined. So we say, okay, in recruiting, success will be, we want, say, 80% of the offers that we extend, at least 80% of them should be accepted. We're going to accept that. Not everyone's going to accept an offer. And so maybe that is a measure that we put in place to track success on that. So then you start building those KPIs, right? And you want to make sure that they align with the objective of the function and then overall objective of the organization as well. The one thing that is also important to note is traditionally with recruiting, especially, we've been very focused on the fundamentals on metrics, right? So we talk about our KPIs, we talk about the offer acceptance rate, of time to fill, time to hire, all of that. But it's also important to incorporate data that is happening across the company. So let's say that we hired 100 people last year. That sounds great, but the further data we want to know is of that 100, how many were backfills versus how many were net new? Because now that's telling you a different story, right? So you want to really provide that intricacy when you're giving that data up, you're reporting on data. So even with DI as well, say if we're saying we're trying to aspire to have X number of people from underrepresented backgrounds to be part of our pipeline, and we made offers to this number of women or people of color and this and that. We also have to talk about, but how many women and or people of color or any other individual from marginalized background also left the company? Because then that delta is really indicative of the actual growth, right? And that's how you have to measure data beyond just like, here's how many people we hired, right? You have to take a step back and say, here's how many people hired of this number backfills, of this number net new. And then in HR in general, you go a step further, right? When we
Mhm.
think about backfills of that number, what percentage were voluntary departures or involuntary departures? Because then that's also telling another story. And that's what data is very important, because it's telling you a story on what's going on.
And I also think well, combining that obviously with qualitative data in terms of like, well, so for example, if one hires the first woman for a team, it might be very difficult because, well, one might wonder as a female applicant, well, why am I the first? So is there perhaps a cultural problem in this team? And therefore, so all the, well, you might have a lot of rejections, but you then need to find out, okay, why are those rejections coming in always for the same team for a reason we don't, well, perhaps we know, but we need to work on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because it's also important in recruiting that we're not just throwing in a bunch of people, especially from marginalized backgrounds, into unsafe spaces in the name of hitting a DI number, right? Because the culture itself has to be set up for them to want to be there long term. Because let's say we bring in that first woman and she's surrounded by men, is that environment conducive for her to be there long term? Are we bringing her into a hostile environment? What are we also doing on the other side to create a psychological safe space, an inclusive space where people can thrive at their jobs? A lot of times companies look at the recruiting teams and say, bring us more diversity in the pipeline, right? I hate to say diverse candidates, but like, we want to see more, bring that up. But we're not here to just throw these people into those spaces. We also want to make sure that these spaces are safe and that they can be there long term. Otherwise, they'll just leave after a year or even 6 months in some cases, when they realize that this job is not the job I interviewed for, right? Maybe it's a lot more hostile, it's a lot more what have you. I'm experiencing all manners of biases and I'm just gonna go. And so then they're like, bring us another woman again, right? It's like, well, let's solve the problem in that culture so that the next person can actually thrive.
To be honest, I think the issue of hiring type talents from marginalized groups, I think there's also a great challenge because for some companies it might be totally obvious and it's not even issue of debate because you're like in particular in the tech space you have so many companies that have incredibly diverse teams where this is actually not even something you think about. Well, there are sometimes more established companies or more mature companies where this is still a big issue, and I think this this gap in mindset is sometimes really hard to bridge because, so for example, for myself, um, it, it would be the oddest thing ever if everyone would look like me. So and therefore that's well perhaps something that for more mature companies that's perhaps a bigger issue. And to think about that is for me nowadays super difficult to be honest.
Absolutely. Because if you think about it too, with smaller companies, right, what happens is that in the very, very beginning, when they get that Series A funding, they're trying to kick things off the ground. They're really focused on, let's just get the business up and running. Let's get the operations in place. Let's try to just get our sales, the core foundations of success, right, is what we're focused on. And in that mindset, the growth and the focus on success, you're just thinking, let's just bring in people, like say a founder could say, I know this person I work with, who do you know? Who do you know? And then we just hire a bunch of people that we know. But then fast forward a year later or 2 years later, you're like, wait a minute, we're 200 or 100 people here and we all look the same, right? This doesn't look good. All right, let's get the recruiting team to throw in, a few people from different backgrounds in here because we don't feel good that we all look the same. And it's not just the looks piece, it's also the think piece, right? Because if you hire people from similar backgrounds, their problem-solving toolkit will be the same. So if there's an issue in the room on how do we solve this problem, you don't have that diversity of thought as well. because everyone is referencing the same thing that they all were told from the same background, and you don't have that innovative voice on the table. So people always think about diversity as the appearance of looks of different people, but it's also been like the innovation that you're getting from.
Exactly. And to be honest, that is something I fundamentally don't understand. It's something I fundamentally don't understand, that people disregard this thought of diverse teams being much more innovative and much more much better in solving a problem. So for us, so for example, just give an example of our company. So we have people from 4 continents, but we're still reasonably small team, and the power of problem solving of people with super different backgrounds is incredibly powerful. And therefore, I, for example, for myself, and I hate, well, sorry, I invited you to talk, and then now I'm talking about my own company.
I love it. Tell me.
It's actually crazy if I would only talk to people that are like me, that look like me, that think like me, that have the same cultural background, that have the same educational background. How can you solve problems at all in such an environment?
Exactly. How can you come up with new ideas?
Exactly. And I really don't understand why we don't talk about diversity much more in light of get diverse teams, get diverse ideas, and therefore you will have a much better solution in the end, because you have so many different perspectives. Why is that not what we are talking about?
Yeah, and that's where innovation is born, because you have all these different ideas on the table that you would never think about on your own. And because when you think about it, say someone comes from a background where they really were poor, they had to struggle for everything, they had to work multiple jobs at a young age, and they've learned the art of hustling and listening to authority and finding their way. They will have a different level of resilience than someone who comes from a privileged background, right? And even that resilience is needed in a job space, because if something was crumbling down, that person will be able to keep the peace and say, we got this, guys, because I've seen worse in my personal life, and I know that this storm is something that we can overcome. And even that, right? You need people on the team that have different energy like that bring to the table, because that makes a team whole. And so a lot of times we think about it from a social justice angle, like, well, let's be fair. Let's hire more Black people. Let's hire more Hispanic people, because it's the right thing to do. But it's beyond that. It's also like we want to see different ideas on the table as well.
Exactly, because to be very fair and very blunt, the right thing to do doesn't necessarily pay bills, right? So, but in the end, well, in particular, the for-profit sector needs to be profitable, needs to have the best ideas, and therefore, I think the topic around, well, diversity doesn't necessarily mean we are all happy. So it's a super it's a team that looks good on paper, that looks good in a presentation. No, it's about getting the best people, getting diverse ideas on the table, and getting diverse, getting the best solutions, because you have different perspectives. And in particular, I think in organizations that where parts of the management do see this as a great opportunity, while other parts are like, well, do we really need this just because mainstream media tells us this is the thing to do? Well, this is how you can overcome those topics, by making sure, hey, we need to be innovative. We need to get the best ideas in our company. So therefore, we need diverse teams.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you on that part. And it's also, I think there's a Glassdoor survey that I saw that said that even people from the majority group, right? And I don't know how you identify, but let's say that someone who's like white, cis male and everything, even them want to work for diverse teams, right? Or in diverse teams, because they feel like they have so much to learn, and it exposes them to a whole new world that it wasn't part of their upbringing, right? So it's not just people of color wanting, or women wanting to work in diverse, even people of the majority want to work in spaces that is diverse, because it's interesting, and you learn so much, you open your world to different ideas and people that you otherwise not even probably even meet, right? So there's so many benefits to that.
Exactly. And well, I really like talking about this topic, even I think it's so incredibly powerful. And I think and falsely it's always put in a corner where it's considered like, well, it's some kind of a nice to have, and well, so there's pressure from society, therefore we have to do this. No, it's in your own interest as a company to be diverse, well, to attract talent from different backgrounds to enable, well, the entire company to be a better organization and to be, in the end, also, so coming back to both of our roots in banking and capitalism, well, to be more successful.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you.
Yolanda, you see, I got carried away a bit here. Well, perhaps coming also back on numbers we talked about before. So the role of technology within HR organizations has become, well, much stronger. The teams rely on technology much more. How have you experienced that, and what's your outlook in, well, for the next few years?
Yeah, so I mean, it has evolved, right? So in the past, HR was very administrative and compliance heavy, right? And now it has evolved into much more of like an employee experience function, a DEI function. I mean, there's HR analytics, which brings us to that data point you're talking about, and technology. So the tools that we're using in this space. Now, when you think about what's the trending thing, AI, right? AI is really trending right now. How do you incorporate that into a space like HR? There are tools out there that actually supporting the mission of a lot of HR teams in ways that we've not seen before. So for example, I think there's a tool out there, I think it's called Textio. They even do, I was looking at it the other day, where when you leave, say, feedback on an employee, right, that tool would scan and color code the terms that are problematic terms. And so let's say you say a word that is non-actionable. Let's say that you say, Benjamin is very robotic, right? What can I do with that feedback, right? It's hard to take action on that. But then you hit that tool, AI will regenerate the sentence into a word that will say, Benjamin needs to have a much more open style of communication to enable thought process and collaboration. That is a different word, right? That's technology that it will rephrase it for you in ways that you will not have thought about. Because what we've done is the manual part of HR, where we're teaching, the DI classes, we're teaching the bias classes and all of that stuff. And we hope that that knowledge will stick. We truly do. But sometimes people take the class, they move on 6 months, 7 months later, to forget whatever that class was about. And so now you need technology to be embedded into daily operations that can elevate that messaging in ways that can really operationalize the goal of inclusion, employee experience, and incorporating AI into your tools like that, right? So you can integrate tools like that into your ATS systems, into even your employee review systems, whatever HCMs the company's using. I think that that's a huge way that you can really optimize your initiatives.
Well, Yolanda, I need to ask you more facts about Bitly. So, can you tell us a bit what you guys do and why is it exciting to work for Bitly?
Yeah, so Bitly, historically we're known as a link shortening company at tool, right? So in fact, the origin of Bitly really started back when, back in the day in Twitter, when you post the link is too long, right? And it looks kind of messy, the aesthetics of it. And so then Bitly was created to make that refined. So it shortens the link and it looks a little bit better, right? And so that was the original, and that's still what we do. But on top of that, we've evolved as a company, right? We now have other product lines. We have the LinkedIn bio, we have the connections platform. We also have the QRCG, which is our QR code product, right? Where you can just scan the QR code, and obviously everyone knows QR codes, right? So that's what the technology of Bitly is. Why I love working for Bitly, the culture really pulled me in. Now, a lot of companies talk a good game to candidates on why you should come work for us. Everybody's a great place to work, right? Even toxic people are a great place to work, right? Everybody says that no one's gonna be like, stay away from us, we're terrible, right? We're always gonna say the best things. But what I'm trying to look for is the authenticity behind that statement. And I remember in my interview, when I was interviewing, I actually got to interview the CEO as well. And the way he talked about psychological safety and the impact of toxic workplaces and the work that has been done, I had never heard a leader talk about it that way, right? Because he just like went there and he wasn't apologetic about it. He's like, hey, we are trying to create a psychological safe space, is what I'm like. He was just going straight for it. And immediately I went from having, like the structured interview into a conversation where I was relating and we're talking about it. We got really deep into why toxic cultures, or what creates toxic cultures, and how those behaviors start from leadership. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just had a conversation with like someone that is like almost like a best friend or something. Like, this is a conversation I'll have with like my best friend, right? This did not feel like an interview. At the end of the call, we're even like, sorry, what was the question I asked you again? I'm like, I don't know. We've gotten to this place now. We're in here, we're so deep, let's wrap it. And it was so real because it's such an interesting interview, right? I came prepared to like, okay, I'm going to be asked a lot of questions. We just like talked. And so when I walked up that call, I kept thinking, I've never had a conversation like that, especially with any leader, right? It always felt like I've always felt like I'm in an interview. That's the first time it's like I was in a conversation and we're just talking about the reality of life and work spaces and why, mental health and psychological. I'm like, how did we get there? I don't know. But that, to me, the fact that that's the CEO of the company and he doesn't know me and he's willing to just talk freely like that, it just really caught my eye in a way that I've never seen before. So that was my first thing. They did reach out to me, so I was very excited and I checked it out, but that really sold me. And when I started working there, I realized that that's the similar culture across, right? I remember one ERG event, they were trying to teach people on what words to say or not to say that could be harmful in using and how to use inclusive language. And they were not sugarcoating anything. I remember thinking I had to turn my camera off because my mouth was dropping like, I can't believe they're just original. But it was so also impressive to me, right? So on a cultural level, that's what pulls me in and that's what keeps me here at Bitly.
I think, for example, inclusive language. Why do you think, and we're going back to the topic again, I feel, why is this still for some organizations a bit of trouble, given, well, an environment where people do not always feel comfortable, some even feel uncomfortable, that doesn't that's not the most productive environment, right? So just to be like also very much the capitalist we talked about before, that's not very efficient.
It's not. And I think a lot of times people are walking on eggshells because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing and the consequences of what that can mean for them, right? And even outside of work, I see that too, where people are very, especially me as a Black woman, the people are very careful with what they say. And I'll tell my friends and family, I'm like, I need you to drop your guard, right? Be yourself around me. Talk to me, say, and even if you say the wrong thing, that's okay. I would tell you how to say better. It's better to make that mistake and then I tell you, and then you grow versus you guarding yourself and you never grow. And in Bitly, there's something that we say around diversity. We say, we call people in, we don't call them out. right? So we don't want to, there's no, the culture of shaming. We don't encourage a shaming culture where you're going to get shamed. You're going to get, called out that you are the one, white person or so-and-so that said this sexist or racist comment. What we want to do is focus on educating people. And I also tell a lot of my white peers too, that it's not about being afraid to say the wrong thing. It's about being willing to make repair when you do, right? So if your friend, say a friend of yours that's a woman or as a person of color that corrects you and say, when you said this, right, this is how it landed for me. And most people freak out like, oh my God, I promise you, I never meant, I'm not this horrible person. But it's not about that, right? It's about saying, thank you so much for that feedback. Give me the opportunity. How can I repair it? What should I say? So you teach me, right? What should I say? Because I'm going to reach out to the next person again or the other person again. Who knows how many people I've said this to? And so seeing it as an opportunity for growing. Therefore, you don't have to walk on eggshells, right? That culture of fear and shaming is what holds people back in using inclusive language.
I think it's a super important point, given I would assume that the vast majority of people don't want to use hurtful language or don't want to be harmful in any way, but due to lack of knowledge, due to lack of experience, probably, right? So it's also could happen that just unconscious about things, and therefore trouble occurs. But I think it's a super nice culture to say we're not calling out, you're calling, and that's lovely. That I really like that. That will be probably the title of the podcast, I guess. That's
Yes.
amazing.
I love it. That's our DI, a big part of our DI, right? We call people in, we don't call them out. And we're educating people so that they can grow and become better human beings to engage with, not so that they should be afraid and walking in shame or fear, especially with the cancel culture in the US, right? No one wants to be canceled. So everyone is walking on eggshells, but that's not what this is about. This is about accepting that, hey, I may have grown I have biases that were programmed in me from a young age through no fault of my own, through the media, through my culture, through what I've learned over time, right? Commercials that I see on TV, right? And everything has embedded in my head about the stories I form with different groups of people, their accent, how they look, their ethnic background, their race, their gender. And so I cannot help myself that I am part of the system that was formed, that I will be biased. So the goal is not to say, let's completely remove all your biases, because that will never happen. The goal is to say, let's bring awareness on how those biases can manifest in ways that can cause harm to those people. Let's say if you're in a position of power and you're making a hiring decision, a promotional decision, where those biases can manifest in ways that can cause harm to other people. And we want to bring awareness so that you're aware that, is this my bias speaking? Or is this my intuition speaking? Or am I focused on the objective assessment of this person, right? So that's the goal. And to accept that, yes, we all have biases, every single one of us, we can't escape it. And that's not the problem. The problem is, how can we stop our biases from manifesting in harmful ways?
So Yolanda, thank you so much for for those great podcasts, and it was amazing chatting to you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I could talk to you forever.
Indeed, I'm just worried that we break the record, and then we will have we scare people off by a too long podcast. But I really love this conversation, Yolanda. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much again for inviting me as a guest on your show. I love your show, and I can't wait to share it with people in my network.
Thank you so much. And everyone, thanks a lot for listening in. I'm sure, we learned a lot today again about super interesting things, calling out, not calling out, calling in. I really love that. Thanks so much for listening in, and see you next time.
See you. Bye.